So welcome back. This is episode 7 of the Epic Epoch podcast. I'm your host, PerryThePig. With me, as always, is my co-host.
Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds.
And I'm hoping that I can get an equally epic welcome to our special guest today. This is Lizard IRL. Lizard, thanks for being here.
Hello, that's me.
This is perfect. All right, listen, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. I should say, if you're listening at some point in the future on YouTube or Spotify, first of all, let us know what platform you're listening on. That way we can make sure that everything works well for you. Also, this is a Thursday podcast instead of our normal Friday podcast. So the rationale for that is we wanted to make sure that we could stream as close to the Path of Exile announcement as possible to make sure that no one shows up live. Wait, no, that's not why, is it? No. We wanted no. Hold on. We wanted to stream on Thursday so that we would allow Lizard to have as much competitive time during the weekend tournaments on Fridays as possible, because we know that he's a very busy person on Friday. So, Lizard, thank you for
Friday. You know, there's so many things on Friday. It's just rough, you know. Like
it's okay.
And like there's the dev stream as well. You got to catch up on that and post and meme chat, sure. So, we have a lot of things to talk about today, and I think the very first thing that we should do is, Lizard, just in case someone out there hasn't heard of you, isn't in Twitch chat, isn't on Discord, isn't on Reddit, isn't on a lot of different things. First of all, we need to find out who you are. Lizard, who are you with regards to Last Epoch?
Hello, I'm Lizard. I'm kind of like one of the old school kind of players of this game. I've been playing for a long time. And I kind of got known just because I was one of the first degenerates to get obsessed with Arena. And here I am. I kind of like focus on endgame and super grindy optimization degenerate stuff. That's what I do.
And I should say, every time that I die to something stupid, I feel like you're the first one who says, why did you die to that? So thank you for helping me to learn the game as well.
Yeah, it's it's funny because now I look at my own gameplay and I'm like, I'm so washed up, but it's okay, you know. It's hard to take it serious, you know, with the game like being in beta for so long. You kind of like lose that spark to keep it like serious. But hopefully, you know, multiplayer should be here soon.
Multiplayer 2022, it's happening this year.
Well, that's what they say in 2019. And, but yeah, I believe them. They seem confident.
Hopefully this time it actually happens. So I guess I want to call out one more thing about you, Lizard. And there's a YouTube video of yours. It's kind of old at this point, but I referenced it myself a long time ago, and I recommend it to people all the time. And that is like, you know, how to gear your character in Last Epoch. Hybrid life only shows up on these pieces of gear. You got to get it there. Percent life shows up in these places. You got to get it there. When I started watching that, and like I started thinking about my gear in that way, like here's the opportunity cost, here's where you can get a prefix, here's where you can get a suffix. That really made me feel like I started understanding Last Epoch better.
Yeah, that video, I thought it was very, but because especially back when I made that video, like all of that was really new, right? So it was a bit kind of like premonitory of what was coming more than anything, because it was just based on what I thought, right? And it's funny because I feel like it's more real than ever, right? And if I had to make the video today, I would probably be even more strict, right? Because I feel like when I made that video, it was pretty open. Like, these are kind of your guidelines. I feel like right now, there's no guidelines. There's the right way and the bad way, you know? And it's a bit, you know, hopefully it diversifies a bit more, but yeah, that's what we have at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So
we've had that HP meta for how long now? A year now?
Well, since the video, pretty much.
I want to make sure that we get through a number of our topics here today. So the first thing that I want to talk about is, well, we're currently in patch 085F, and with this patch, we've seen the rebalancing of one of the most abusive unique items that has ever been in Last Epoch. And what I'm talking about is something that I use to get rank 1 on the solo ladder, which is Ashes of Mortality. So, Dread, I know that this is something near and dear to your heart. Can you walk us through like what it was and then what it is now?
All right. Ashes of Mortality, when it was released, it was ridiculous. Pretty much the idea is you gain a bunch of ward on hit when you hit a mob that has ignite or dam stacks on them, comparable to the amount that they have on them. And the reason why this was so broken was because it scaled with application rate, meaning if you applied more ignites, you'd get more ward. If you hit the enemies faster, like with like Warpath, for instance, or Fireball specifically, were the the cases that were the most broken, you get a bunch of ward because of that. If you had a lot of attack speed, cast speed, you would get a lot because of that as well. And this was like without ward retention. If you didn't have ward retention, didn't matter because you're gaining like hundreds of thousands of ward, and it literally didn't matter. And then rolled around recently, I think it was patch note D. Was it D?
F,
B, C, D,
I think F was
well,
the
no, it
last
was
one.
D the first nerf, and then F.
Yeah.
So D, they nerfed it. They just nerfed the numerical values, which obviously did not affect it at all. Like, sure, you went from 2 million ward to 200,000 ward, which obviously is still obscene, right? That's like way more than
Only
you'll ever need
1/10
ever.
of what it used to be, but it's still way too big.
Which means that something at a base of the item was broken. So this patch, what they did was they nerfed the application and everything to 1 second per proc, meaning you'll only gain it once per second. So instead of gaining it 20 times per second with like Fireball or Warpath or whatever, you'll gain it 1 time per second. And it's still very strong. The self-application of Damned and Ignite is still very strong, as per Foe showing us that you could still just damn yourself and get a bunch of ward that way. And now the ring is in its most balanced state it's been since it was released.
With the cooldown.
And that's where we're at. Yeah.
So is this ring worth using on like Ignite Ignite Warpath now?
I don't use it on Ignite Warpath specifically, just because like you'd have to build into ward retention to make it useful. But if you had LP on it, sure, LP ones, because you have a lot of increased damage on it. Like all that stuff is great. Like it has cast speed, makes your sigil casting even faster. Like there's a lot of things that the ring gives you that you could just use it, right? I would definitely see if you had LP on it, you could use it.
I feel like one of the things that I've heard Lizard that you talk about in the past is things that scale with pack size, and how once you take those into arena, they just become like absurd. Is a 1 second cooldown like fine for this?
I think, I mean, the fact that anything that has a cooldown, it basically makes it so pack size is not a thing, right? Because even if you could proc it 20 times, you only proc it once because of the cooldown. And yeah, I just feel like on a principle, it should never be easier, or you should never be stronger for being on a harder situation, right? It's just like weird. And it's funny because one of the first builds that I played and how I got kind of like my name on the scene and stuff was actually precisely that. It was Soul Fist. And it was a build that basically gave you ward per enemy that you hit, and you could hit basically the entire screen. And what happened is, like, when you were fighting single targets, you had like 3k ward maximum. But when you spawned like a bunch of worms or spiders, you reached 200k ward. And then obviously you couldn't die. And they nerfed that, and obviously they had to nerf that, right? The ward side of it, of course. And I don't know, I was pretty pissed when the ring got released, because I was like, didn't we learn the lesson like 2 years ago about how ward scaling with density is like a bad idea?
They did say that one of the reasons they missed this before it got released into, like, I guess our servers, is that the fact that you can only see 15, like, for the maximum stacks of ailments that are on an enemy, they said that because of that, they missed it. They didn't realize how many stacks of Ignite you can actually get on an enemy.
I would like to add that is a self-made problem.
I feel like that's just Mike being goofy on the dev stream, and he's just like, oh, we didn't check. Like, I would like to think that the people who are like designing and actually testing stuff, play the game. I think it was more of an oversight. We had things like this before, right? We had bugs, oversights, and for example, including myself, when I read the item on the patch notes, I was like, well, this is probably gonna have some internal cooldown or whatever, and I literally, like, I just assumed, right? Like, basically, I assumed the item would be what it is now, right? Maybe because I played for so long that I've just seen how these things normally end up or are, right? And again, it's like it's one of those things where like is that item I would say like there's a game out there in the world where I'm sure that item fits. I don't know if it's Last Epoch, and I could say the same about a lot of things, right? Right now, like I talk a lot about this on my stream. You guys know I complain a lot, but like the game is never gonna be balanced. It's an ARPG. But again, I always make this metaphor like, okay, you can go into a medieval warfare and there's swords and crossbows and bows, and there's a guy with a horse who's really overpowered, the horse guy, right? And then there's this guy who's on full-on Iron Man armor, dropping nukes from space. It doesn't really, I don't know. It's a weird movie, you know.
Hey, that's the gameplay that I want. Don't you take that away from me.
I think it's fine if it's Iron Man versus Iron Man. Everyone's happy, you know. But it's just weird when you have both in the same picture. It's the depths, and again, this is for the depths to decide. Like, what is the game gonna be? Is it the game where swipe fits in, or is it the game where Umbral Blades just like, you know?
So one of the rough things about Ashes of Mortality is that it's an amount of ward you gain per stack of ailment on the enemy, and Last Epoch, unlike a game like Path of Exile, for example, all of the ailments are just like unbound. You can have as many stacks of bleed, as many stacks of ignite, as many stacks of poison on the enemy as you want, because that's
Except
how the
time
application
for
rate
some
works.
reason.
So I want to use this in order to move into our next topic here, which is maybe like crit builds and builds that have this like large, chunky upfront damage, as opposed to dot builds. I want to use this as a way to talk about like things that, when I first started watching Lizard, over a year ago at this point, I would hear things like, why would you ever play a dot build? Just play a crit build, just play something that's like upfront and bursty and kills the monsters faster. And now it almost feels like the whole paradigm of the community is saying,
It's
like,
the
hey,
opposite,
ailment builds are pretty good.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about this. Lizard, how do you feel about dot builds these days?
I mean, going back to that statement, it's actually absolutely true, but it's also because the game has changed a lot, right? Back in the day, the game was way harder, right? Way harder with the old protection system and all that, and how the game shift and some of the enemies we had in arena or whatever. So when you had crystal elementals spawning in groups of 10 and they're just one-shotting you, right? It's like, why would you play a dot where you have to wait like 3 seconds, right? Even if the damage is superior, which it was already, but why would you do that when if you don't kill the enemy fast enough, you're gonna die? Especially because this is before we had things like Bastion and Ravenous Void and things like that. I mean, everyone would agree that right now the game is just it's a tank game, and that is what Last Epoch is. And it's funny because I've been predicting this for 2 years. Like, if you type on Google, Block is OP Last Epoch, you have post of me on 2018 complaining about these things. And turns out I was kind of right, what can I say? I think there's a huge problem with this, but going back to the dot versus crit thing. Right now, because the game is all about going full tank, right? Because if you don't die, then you keep playing, right? It turns out that ailments, even though the damage takes a bit to ramp up, they're basically free damage just because of how mechanically they work, right? You can always just like, well, if your ailment only does 10 damage, well, just stack 10 of them, now you're doing 1,000, or whatever. And that just creates this paradigm where you can basically go ZDPS, and just by persistence, you end up doing more DPS than anything else.
Is this a case of weapons just not having enough flat damage on them in order to compete with that?
I mean, I think flat damage in general is just absolute dog shit. Like tier 5 flat damage is a fucking offense to players. Like, you're telling me that crafting a tier 5, right? On my tier 2 weapon, it gives me like 50 damage, which is basically less than a poison stack.
Especially if you compare it to like ignite effect and ignite duration or ailment duration.
When I'm applying 200 poisons per second, like, it's and especially since like I don't know, implicits are, you get 100 flat on your implicit, and it's like, all right, I'm a 200 weapon, cool. And it's just on a pretty bad state. That again, I don't want to get too ranty, but And again, going back to crit, there's two types of crit builds, right? The good ones and the bad ones.
Go
The good
on.
ones are the ones that give you crit for free. Either because you have spell crit for free on your spell, right? For example, Elemental Nova or Lightning Blast, right? You have so much flat crit that and you have so much flat crit on the mage passive that where the fuck do you build crit on those characters? You're level 40 and you're already capped on crit. Or things that give you guaranteed crit like Dreadshade, Firebrand, things like that. Because crit basically has this trifecta, right, of flat crit, well, crit chance, crit multi, flat damage, and then generic increases and multis, right, like every other build. But the builds that basically remove the crit chance equation from gear taxing basically get to crit like crazy, and they remove the hardest thing to balance, right? Because if you're building crit chance, you're not building damage, and therefore it kind of like balances itself out, right?
Because you only have 2 prefixes on any piece of gear. Like, you
Yeah,
need to get
exactly.
crit chance somewhere. Right?
Exactly. And right now it's like, I feel like the abilities that are meant to be crit, you as a player don't really have many tools. Like, where can you get flat crit chance? You really can't, right? Like, it's really hard. So for example, if you want to play something like Vengeance crit, right? The meme, yeah, good luck, you know.
See, what you do is you run Spriggan Companion, and you get base crit from that.
Yeah, that's another funny one. Um, so I think it has created this problem where damage over time. Basically, the only thing you need is if you're doing element damage over time on your gear, and that's it. That's it. Like I played and we have all of these luxury things, poison effect and bleed effect, dude. You don't need that. If you want to make a clickbait video with 40 million damage on the dummy, sure, go full damage and be dumb, right? But dude, I was playing this weekend on Electrify. I didn't build a single Electrify unique, right? I didn't build single damage, and I'm hitting the dummy for 1 million, full tank, And then I go play Vengeance on the same character, right, with the same investment, and I'm hitting the dummy for 10,000 with the same investment, and a melee range.
I want to ask you about that. So this past weekend we had the Vision GL weekend tournament that we have pretty much every week with Vision, and it was a Paladin weekend, and you chose to use Javelin. So while I was lurking in your Twitch chat, I thought that you were going to try to play some kind of like crit Javelin, ballista node with like 3 or 5 javelins coming down from the sky. And I thought that you were going to play a crit build, but you ended up playing this Electrify damage over time build instead. How did you make that decision? Was that just like, I know this is going to do more damage, like you're just doing it for fun?
I mean, it's very simple actually. It goes down to how the skill trees are designed in Last Epoch, right? If you want to get flat crit for your javelin, well, you only have one option. It's the flat crit on the tree, and running a weapon that has flat crit and will give you 0 flat damage because it's a throwing skill, right? And if you want to get flat damage for your ability, you're gonna have to get flat damage on your rings. That's gonna make it really hard to craft because you want to be focusing on suffixes and implicits and all that. So it's just like so much more investment. And again, one of the ways that spamming Javelin is viable is by grabbing the minus mana cost nodes on the actual tree, right? Where you get -3 per, like on the bottom of the tree, you have minus mana cost. Well, if you go for the crit version, you need to go for the crit nodes, and therefore you can't afford those. So it's kind of like, oh, do I want to spam an ability for free that does 1 million damage? Or do I want to have to micromanage mana for critting for like 100k maximum?
It's interesting talking about where you get your flat damage from. So if you're playing like a throwing attack that wants to be crit and wants to have that flat damage, you have your rings where you can get like the cursed affix of flat fire, and then you also have the minus hybrid affix that you can get on your rings. So like you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because you can get cursed on your amulet as well, and that's where your flat damage would come from. But on the other hand, if you're playing a bleed build, an electrify, ignite or something, you can get ignite all over the place. You can get on your skill tree, you can get conversions, you can get like unique items, and you can even get like you were using in your build this past weekend. Just the Dragon Bone Axe itself has 100% chance on it itself. Like, there's a lot of ailment application, right?
Yeah. It's nuts. And again, it's funny, right? Because I'm talking like the throwing attack version is bad, but I actually think that's the balanced one, right? Like that makes like when I listen to what an ARPG is about, okay, so you have a build, it's not so good at the beginning, it's good enough, right? And then you get good gear, and then it gets better, and you get damage from your gear, and eventually the build is good with investment, and you're proud of it, right? And you succeed, and your effort gets rewarded. Or you could do nothing and be the best, you know?
It kind of sounds like the swipe problem. Where like, is swipe weak, or is swipe the one that's balanced appropriately and everything else is just busted?
I think swipe is a bit of a curious case, because I do think swipe is good if you don't level with it, right? Because again, we go back to swipe. If you want to do damage with swipe, right, and you're playing crit swipe, I assume that's what you're talking about, where you're gonna need attack speed, not hard to get. It's hard to get, right? You're gonna need flat crit. It's hard to get. You're gonna need flat damage. It's hard to get. You're not gonna need crit multi. It's hard to get. So you have a build that needs 6 pieces to click, and none of them are free. None of them for swipe. You don't get anything, right? So that's why swipe feels so bad early on, because you don't really get anything for free, and then you have all these other builds that are getting everything for free. Now, is swipe balanced? I mean, swipe probably needs some help in the early game, but I think end game swipe is so much more like, I'd rather have swipe than Umbra Blades if you have to use a metric for balance. And I proved it. I played swipe on these weekend tournaments. I cleared all the content, and it was fine. I had to play 40 hours, instead of 10, like this weekend. I was level 80, by Sunday, by Monday, and I pushed all my characters like trolling,
I'll have you know that my Holy Trail Javelin character that cleared maps by using lunge got to 100 without even trying. So just
yeah, exactly.
Dread, what were you gonna say? You were gonna talk?
He's right, and this is actually a perfect example of what we were talking about earlier about the crit being free and all these investment points. Well, recently, last patch, I actually played a crit swipe build that was a Beastmaster, and you got all your attack speed from your tree, because you get that 50% at the top of Beastmaster, right? You get the aspect of the shark, all the free attack speed there. And then you get your free crit, because I was doing, you get your free crit, you run base crit on both your weapons, and then you get the wolf crit, the war cry crit, and the aspect of that's a lot of effort, right?
Yeah.
But then you got it was free without your gearing. And that was just good enough to play, right?
Yeah,
so it's like...
But in that particular case, just for the things that you're saying, you need all of these skills, you're gonna need the base weapons, you're gonna need the top of the tree. That build, you can start playing it at level 60, basically.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I don't think there's anything wrong about it. But dude, you can literally equip Holy Trail Javelin at level 20, and with I'm not exaggerating, with level 20 character, your level 20 character, you can Holy Trail all the way up to 300 corruption in 1 day, with no upgrades, with just a weapon with nothing.
True.
That's the nerf version, by the way. It's the nerfed version. Like
Yeah, I was just bringing that up because I was like, I feel that is balanced, because I'm investing all this stuff into the crit, right? And that's like the thing, is having different ways of investing into crit, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just necessarily the auto crit, but it's just having other ways of investing into crit. And that's what a lot of these skills lack, is having the same amount of investment. Right.
Not to mention, sorry to cut this off, and not to mention, I feel like back when crit was meta, we also had worst implicits. For example, like what were you gonna get on an implicit on rings or whatever, or like you just get crit, who cares, right? But now you have things like ivory rings, you can get free necro res. You have things like all the new class specific relics. You have all of these new super core uniques like Quicksilver Coil for haste. You have again Bleeding Heart with 4 LP now, which it's ridiculous, right? You have Auroras, you have Bastion, and suddenly, if you start ticking all of these ticks, which is basically what all builds use, where the fuck do you get your crit from? You can't get an offhand, because let's be honest, if you're playing a build and you're not using Bastion, it's a bad build. Next. I hate it, but it is what it is, right? Uh, and you are allowed to do that because again, you don't lose anything for using Bastion. Okay, I go from doing 20 million damage from 10. It's still 10 million more than I need, so who cares?
And then all
And
of a
if you
sudden,
and if you build damage, then you get punished by monster DR, boss DR, so the kill time is the same or almost the same. So
I feel like if we start talking about boss damage reduction, then we're going to be here
yeah,
all night.
man.
So I'm going to try to
I'll
steer
stop.
away from
I'll
that.
stop. I'll stop.
Well,
Yeah.
a good representation is let's just think for a second, right? Let's say we're playing a build, right? I'm trying to think of like a good example here.
Erasing story?
I guess we can bring up Vengeance here. Let's just think of Vengeance, right? Just for a second. I know. Let's think. Like let's compare like ailment Vengeance, versus like crit Vengeance, right? Now let's think.
I think it's better, by the way.
If you're using a one-hander and a shield, what would you rather be doing? Ailments or crit?
Oh yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
It's like in every single situation here, like it's the same thing. Like what would you rather be doing? Ailments or crits? And the monolith system is the part of the problem in my opinion because you get punished for playing crit not only from the monolith system with crit avoid and all that and dodge and all that. It's also because what we just brought up, Bastier, which I won't go too far into, but Bastier also penalizes crit way more than dots
Way more,
because dots don't need to do that much damage to kill. You have the uptime and all that.
It's worth mentioning that
And
like a
that's part of
dodge
it.
monolith is probably going to punish an ailment build the same way that it punishes a crit build.
Not to the same degree, because the thing is with a crit build, the way your crit build is set up, right? You want to one-shot the enemy. That's the plan with the crit build, right? Most of the time, if you're playing like a crit build, you one-shot the enemy, that's your defense, right? And if enemies dodge you, then it's like whatever. But if you're playing an ailment build and you're used to hitting something 60 times before it dies, like most ailment builds, like
Doesn't matter if you
and all
miss
that,
20 of them.
it doesn't matter if you miss some of it, yeah, and you're tanky enough to deal with that already.
And
Well, the crit
you're
build,
overkilling. You're like the thing is like if like most of the time when you're playing a dot build, right? You hit your dots, you're hitting for 100, then the next second 1,000, the next second 10,000, right? So even if you miss, normally that third tick, or that second tick, that fourth tick is overkilling for so much, right? That it doesn't really matter if you missed 20% of your damage. That fifth tick is so overkill. Like I don't know if you guys had that, but for example, you're single targeting, you volatile reversal for the buff or whatever, which is another issue, but whatever. And then suddenly the siege golem or whatever you're attacking disappears. You don't even see the damage numbers. The game can't keep up. It can't keep up, right?
Leech is another good example too. Like for instance, if I attack something with a crit build, right, and I hit it, and I overleech, like I way over, the amount I need, right? I go up to full life again, right? And then my leech is gone. It's over. It's done with. Never get you don't get leech from that source again. Then you hit them again, right? But the problem is, if you compare that to a dot build, right? If I miss a shot on a dot build, like with dodge, I'm still leeching because it ticks, gives you healing, ticks gives you healing, tick gives you healing, right? While with the crit build, if I hit, leech go back to full, I lose that leech, and then I miss, all of a sudden I don't have that leech and I die, And that's another part of it. That's why dodge isn't that bad.
It's also worth mentioning that in terms of gear, right? Like the damage over time nodes are just so much more effective, right? For example, if you take a look at rings, let's just say you're playing a crit build, okay? A tier 5 crit on a ring is what max rolled from 40 to 60% increased crit. If your build has 5% base crit, you're getting from a full tier 5, you're getting what? An extra 2% crit. Like
it is worth mentioning. So as long as you're bringing that up right now, it's worth mentioning. In the past, there was like some kind of murmuring around EHG employees saying something about reworking crit chance. Maybe they take away increased crit and add more added crit into the game. So at some point in the future, this whole conversation about like where do you get crit, this could very well change. That is still on the back burner.
That is an entire other conversation because I think, I mean, what the devs have talked about just seems like a horrible idea because it basically removes the entire beauty of crit actually. Because basically Mike was saying that I mean, if you're playing crit, who cares? You just want 100%, right? Who cares where you get it from? Well, I care because if I have an exalted weapon with exalted crit, suddenly my increased crits are more valuable, and that creates an entire dynamic that is
Dichotomy.
it's really great, right? Like if I find an increased crit, suddenly my flat crit is more valuable, and that create allows you to create a puzzle. Like, oh look, like I got a tier 7 flat crit now, so now I only need 3 increased crits instead of 4, and I get room for mana regen, for crit multi, for plus skills, and I mean that's what RPGs are about. It's about that puzzle. His crit is just gonna be turned to, okay, I just stack flat everywhere until I get 100. It's the same, dude. Well, it's not the same
Yeah,
because it's boring as fuck. It's not the same, even
pretty
if the
much.
outcome is the same.
The biggest problem with the crit thing
I
they're
love
talking
Mike, by the way.
about,
Sorry.
yeah, I do too. The
Um,
base crit versus increased crit thing and just getting rid of it, that's not a good idea because of the fact that crit is, like Lizard said, insanely dynamic. Like, for instance, there are some builds where you have like 20% base crit and you don't need that much increased crit to get to cap. And increased crit becomes useless after you get crit cap, right? So you want to like invest into it to the point where you get 100% crit. And increased crit to that build is nowhere near as good for increased crit for a build that has like 10% base crit. Like, for instance, like we were talking about with the Beastmaster build, right? I was running 2 crystal swords with 5% base crit on each, right? Because I could afford that because of the way my build was set up. And all the increased crit from the wolves, the frenzy totem, all of that was great for the build because I only had 15% base crit, and that was capping me out because of that, right? But if you turned all those to base crits and all that, right? If you turned it all to just flat crit, then all of a sudden I go to like I would probably end up with like maybe 40% crit with all that investment or something like that.
It's a
Like,
little speculative, but
yeah,
it's
the
a different dynamic
difference.
altogether. I hear you.
Well, yeah,
I don't know. Maybe I mean maybe they have something. I mean, I think to be fair, EAG, a lot of the changes to systems they've done recently, even though the community has been a bit like, ooh, what is it gonna be? A lot of them have been actually really good at the
yeah.
end, right? Like the new crafting and stuff. So again, I give them the. I'm sure if they do something, it's not gonna be something
Yeah.
stupidly dumb like the thing I'm saying. But I mean, we have stupidly things in the game, so who knows? Maybe, maybe
I
they fuck
I
up.
I want to take the conversation and move it towards something else here. Do you have anything else you want to say about like the crit particular like crit versus dot?
No, but I basically wanted to say that why build your tier 5 for 50% increased crit when you can have 150 increased elemental damage over time on every prefix?
I'm with you on that one. I like damage over time builds, whether they're elements or spell
It's
dot.
so overpowered. It's crazy. Like,
So speaking of like maybe a skill that gets like 20% base crit, we talked about swipe. Swipe's one of the early skills, but it really starts to take off once you have all those puzzle pieces later on. I want to talk about builds that get power for free, which you get just for leveling, as opposed to characters that feel good once you get all that gear and like once you get all that investment into the character.
yeah.
Because I know this is a big question. When it
you-
comes
you-
to these weekend tournaments, I'm just going to toss this in there real quick. For these weekend tournaments, and Lizard, I know you do this as well because I check out the Discord. So for anyone who doesn't know about these Vision GL tournaments, ultimately it's about as many waves as you can push in the arena, but you also get some bonus points for killing the tier 4 versions of each of the new bosses. So we have like Dungeon 1, 2, and 3, and then we also have the tier 4 version of Arena of Champions. So if you complete all of those things, you get some bonus waves added to the end of that. And Lizard, after 10, 20, 30 hours of playing on a weekend, you're making characters who are just like deleting these pieces of content. Where's the aspirational stuff after that?
I mean, and to be honest, I'm only doing it on the third day. I mean, this is an entire conversation, especially since we have Lone Star in the chat too. This is an entire different conversation. The main reason I'm doing it on the last day is not because I can't do it earlier. It's because I don't have any reason to do it earlier. Like, if you're doing dungeons, you're not getting stability and you're not getting blessings. So if I don't have all the blessings I want, I'm not doing dungeons. It's a waste of time.
I'm with you on that.
Right? Like, the game is about getting your blessings. That's it. That's the most important part because you can't really gear a character before you have your blessings, right? again, there's different solutions. We can. You guys talked about it on the other thing, but as long as you're not getting me stability, you're slowing my progress towards the blessings, which is my day 1, day 2, day 3 goal. Yeah, you gotta pass, right? And going back to your question, it's like, yeah, I mean, obviously, once you get a bit experience, I think a lot of people think that Last Epoch, when they first install the game and they see the skill trees and they say, oh my god, this is not like PoE. We have so much options, so much build diversity. I mean, you just type more damage on the search function, and if you have more than X, you know the build is gonna do everything for free. And if you don't have, you know, oh well, I'm gonna have to grind a lot more, right? So, so yeah, I feel like right now the player gets too much free power. And again, people can say, oh, but Lisa, you're very experienced, and that's why you're doing this in such a small amount of time. And true, obviously, experienced players are going to be able to showcase what's broken easier, and they're going to be able to achieve things easier. There's also people in PoE that clear everything in one day, and that's not what the average player does, true. But the problem is, like, the more players we have that play more than a weekend per patch, right? The more people are going to realize the core issues of the game. Like when you're giving players, like I would say 90% of player power comes from just being level 70, right? Everything else, like, doesn't really add much to the game. Like, what is the difference between once you get your level 20 skills, right? What is the difference between a character with 100 hours and a character with 2,000 hours? Well, you have a bit better LP items, maybe. You have an extra 1,000 HP, which won't save you from the shit that actually kills you. And you do, instead of having 500 increased damage, you had 700. And instead of having 10 times the damage you need, you have 20 times the damage you need.
Let's get an example here. I want to make sure that people in the audience know what kinds of builds we're talking about. I want an example of like a build that gets a ton of power for free on the one hand, and like maybe a build that is very cool and is like, you know, a great build once you get all the gear for it. Like what are those two sides?
I think, for example, builds that just are completely ridiculous is, for example, anything dots that we talked, but let's just talk, for example, about Leech, right? You're playing a Leech, right? You put on Death Seal. Death Seal gives you 500 increased damage and multiplicative damage. Anything works. Doesn't matter. If you want to make transplant damage work, Infernal Shade, it will work because it's already giving you by level, you know, whenever you unlock it at level 50 or whatever, you have more damage than you ever need.
You've got two
and again,
health
things
bars,
like
you've got armor, damage reduction, percent, more damage. You got like everything that you need.
I think it's the funny part. Like once you get a bit of experience, you realize that there's builds like this on every class. Right? Every class has builds like this, and I don't know. It's kind of under like, why would I play a character that needs the? And again, I think there's a difference between. You guys have talked about this on previous podcasts too, about starter builds, right? And builds that starter builds that fall off, right? And then builds that because they require certain pieces, you can't level with them. I feel like right now, or starter builds are also the best builds, because they don't really fall off, because the things that make the builds good that's the thing that makes a build good in endgame too. If your ability has like 200% more damage, well, you can't get that anywhere else. So yeah, it's gonna be OP at level 20 and it's gonna be OP at level 100. You know.
I would like to. I would put a build out there. Well, what about like bow crit Cinder Strike?
Yeah, good luck with that one, right?
I've heard people tell me that they enjoy leveling with Cinder Strike. You know, I've played a little bit of it.
The leveling is fine, but the leveling with that build is fine precisely because it does give you very, very good things early on. It gives you flat damage, right? Like on the top nodes, it gives you like 10 or 20 or something per point. And yeah, obviously you have a bow with 10 bow damage. You put on Cinder Strike, and suddenly you have 30 flat damage at level 15. Yeah, it's great. But you could also play Puncture and hit enemies for 1,000 with a couple of
them.
It's funny. Yeah, exactly. Cinder Strike kind of checks one of those boxes of a conversation we had like just 1 minute ago. It's a skill that feels really good early game, and I kind of describe it as it's the skill that has everything built into it except for more damage. It doesn't have more damage
That's
anywhere.
one node.
And
One
good luck.
node.
Good luck making it. Again, if you try to make that build comparable to anything that has more damage, you're just gonna feel like you just want to cut your dick off. You know, like it's gonna be horrible. And again, as players, we don't have agency. We don't control it. And not only that, but I feel like when the depths, like when the depths design skills, right? Let's just say I always talk about the Devouring Orb, right? The Devouring Orb has like a lot of nodes that give you more damage. Like you guys know that I like the orb damage, right? The bottom nodes, and those are 200% more damage with 5 points. I mean, you get the Devouring Orb at level 25, and you can get those points literally by, you get the orbiting, the movement speed, and then you get the damage. With 7 points in it, you already have all that more damage. And the Devouring Orb, for whatever fucking reason, has a flat damage of 80. So that's already more
And the
damage
vitality skill.
that you can do with a melee attack. But at level 100, Vengeance, or every melee attack really, that is like a spammable ability, like Orb, right, has a flat damage of 2. Of 2. At level 100, at level 0, it doesn't matter, of 2. And if you get a weapon with 100 damage, it's still less damage than Orb at level 20. And you say, and I think that flat damage from Orb, it's actually pretty balanced once you are level 100. But when the fact that they give you that amount of damage at level 20, how is that ever going to be balanced,
I want to give a shout out. I'm going to give a shout out real quick just to Twitch chat for the people who are listening to the podcast here. But this is someone saying this is another reason that we should have, please give 5 or 10% more damage per point that we spec into a skill tree instead of putting more damage onto a node in the skill tree. This is not the only solution, but it's definitely something that I've seen come up a lot. And honestly, it's a solution that I had years ago at this point, playing Path of Exile. And it kind of happened in Path of Exile after they normalized the amount of more damage you get per support gem in your 6th link. But instead of having like, what are my 6th link gems going to be? Well, I'm going to use the ones that have the most more damage on them. When those get normalized, people get more freedom to, use the skill defining, the skill modifying, the GMPs and intensifies and unleashes that make the skill feel like the kind of thing they want to play. Instead of just, here's the more, here's the more,
This one's tricky, right? Because there's going to be skills where it makes complete sense. But for example, abilities that have like really big damage nodes locked under cooldown or things like that, then you gotta be careful, right? Because if you give generic damage and then all of the versions of the ability are getting it, cooldown, no cooldown, conversion, no conversion, spammable, non-spammable, it gets a bit dangerous. I do think overall they need to take away power from just like having a level 20 skill, and they need to take away, in my opinion, the healthiest thing to do would be like, okay, you take a character at level 60, which is what a normal player is gonna do. You do the level 50, you're doing the level 50 monos, and you balance the abilities. So you have a gray weapon, you have your passives, and you're doing just enough damage to one-shot the trash mobs. So even if you have an absolute troglodyte who's never played Last Epoch, they're not gonna have a sluggish experience, and they're still gonna have fun with it, right? It's very important that these nerfs don't affect the casual people that are just want to have fun, kill monsters on a weekend because they've been working all day, right? But it's really important that if that player keeps playing and they get too empowered, there should be a moment where like, oh, whoa, my character is not strong enough anymore. I'm empowered. I'm with the big boys now. And there should be things that maybe that's where dungeons come on. I go do side content because I need the upgrades. Otherwise, I'm going to be facing a wall, or I'm getting slowed down and I'm not efficient anymore. That happens in any RPG that I feel. How many times have you're playing PoE, you go do a red map and you're getting your ass kicked and you go like, holy shit, I'm going to go back to yellows, right? Or same with Diablo, right? You jump into from normal to nightmare and you're like, all right, time to kill Mephisto 20 times, right?
We don't have it. Dread and Lizard, do either of you ever go backward in Last Epoch? Do you ever go back and do something you already did?
No. Never.
Like, do you ever lower corruption or go back one monolith or?
No, never. I don't think anyone
does. One time I would ever do that is if I'm like objective hunting versus like corruption grinding. Like for instance, I want this unique bow with LP on it. I'll hop on, on a marksman with an obscene amount of movement speed, go to like 200 corruption, and just go and get all those objective nodes. And that's it. But even then, that would still be better at higher corruption if I had better gear. But the thing is like, you know, you can't go fast and do all that. Well, with a decent amount of budget anyways. And even then, it's still inefficient versus just doing really high content because you get more of those nodes as you go higher on, right?
Actually, I would say that the only content that achieved this actually are the dungeons. Like, I feel like sometimes, you know, like, because obviously I said yesterday, oh, you can kill the dungeons in a one-day character. You can, but the reality is like 99% of players, I know because of Twitch chat and because of Discord, and you see what people talk about, how many people come to you and say, oh man, I'm defeating tier 3 Julra, but tier 4 it's too much. That's great, right? Because that player is gonna come, is gonna investigate, is gonna, oh, I'm missing this passive, or I'm missing this, so I'm gonna go get this. And then when they finally defeat tier 4, they're happy as fuck, right? And it's something that's completely aspirational, and it's an object, like it's a goal that is completely achievable, anyone can do it. But at least you're faced with that. You at least need to earn it, right? And I think the dungeons do a great, regardless of the problems the dungeons have, I do actually think that the tier system does achieve that. Whether it's corruption, completely fails at that. I think it's abysmal. Like the fact that I don't know, you guys play almost as much as me, right? You played also Perry on all these weekend tournaments. Like if I tell you, right, you're playing your character, you're on the level 90 monos, right? And imagine I go, you know, Men in Black on you, and I go like, right, and I erase your memory, and I put you into empowered instead of the level 90 zone. I put you into empowered. Right? You, and I tell you, okay, tell me, are you in the mono that you wear, or are you in empowered? Can you 100% tell me where you are?
No.
Do you
Totally
feel it?
Not at 100 base corruption, no, not at all.
No.
Maybe even 200. No.
What is the difference? Like, I can't tell.
The modifiers? Oh, you just read the modifiers and how much they give.
Yeah, but
you.
imagine obviously you
real
can't
quick,
see the
I wanna
area
interrupt
level,
you.
right? You know what I'm saying? Like,
I want to interrupt you
Yeah.
real quick. So before we get too far away from this conversation, you were mentioning about the aspirational tier 4 stuff. I just want to say, I play in hardcore chat. I very, very seldomly actually do tier 4 anything. I have done
That's
them, I
good.
have practiced them, but like, if I have less than an 80 or maybe even 90% chance of succeeding, I don't do something in hardcore, because I don't want to die. So I don't really do these things. If I want a Vessel of Strife, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go level up a brand new Summon Wraith Necromancer, and I'm going to get it to like level 75, and I'm just going to one-shot Drura. Because me in hardcore, I don't want to risk it doing tier 4.
that's a different problem. But I think that's great that you as a player, I think that's the only content that actually causes you that, right? And I think I think that's great. You know, we need more of that. I think, and we need that kind of feeling where it's not frustration, it's challenge, right? There's a very thin line there. But I think again, like if you just put people on autopilot, and again, I'm playing the game, right? And people tell me what corruption you're on, and I say, I don't fucking know, 200, 400, I don't know. Like that's horrible, right? You know, it's horrible. I think, I as a principle, I think 200 corruption should always, by design, be harder than 100. Always. There should be a bottom neck and top neck.
What do you think about echo modifiers and people who maybe like me who only click on the ones that say enemies have a chance to slow you, enemies have endurance threshold, enemies have more health. Like I do that because it's extremely safe. I don't click on the ones that say enemies have 300% increased damage because they're
why are they even there?
Though.
Why are they even there? Like again, I think I understand that modifiers are important, and I understand that it's important to throw things at the player to keep him engaged and strategize. All of that is great, but when you have content that is doing no damage and then a single modifier makes it 3 times, 5 times, 6 times as hard, you're not really adding strategy. You're just calling me you're either gonna spit on my face or call me dumb, right? I think what we need is like, okay, what if like the content without modifiers is a 7 out of 10 difficulty, and with very hard modifiers you reach a 9 out of 10 difficulty. So you have that 20% variance that depending on how unlucky you are or how you ballsy you are, there's gonna be that. Well, I'm gonna take that extra inch of difficulty. Great. The problem is like we go from 0 to 100 in a single mod, and it's like, and again, it kind of like completely undermines that feeling of success, right? Because I know you guys do that, like know that. For example, when people tell me, "Oh, I'm killing this boss at 500 corruption," and then they send me a screenshot, and the mod has 100% increased crit chance and chance to slow. Okay, so basically it's like 0 corruption. Good, Literally, it does, because again, getting the mod to 100% more damage when the base damage is 2. Okay, now he's doing 6. Congrats, like you have 4,000 life.
Can I just mention how important it is whenever somebody's looking at a YouTube video about how good a build is, how important it is to look at the right side of the screen and see what the modifiers are that they're currently fighting?
I am sadly at fault for this slightly. When I play the game, I'll be honest with you, Lizard, I don't look at the side. I don't look.
Yeah, that's what I was.
I don't look at the mods. I just play the game.
Am I the only one who looks at the screen?
It's funny, Perry.
Because when you die, you lose.
And when you play a strong build, like modifiers only have 2 stages: the stages where they ruin your life and you wish they didn't exist, and the stages where they're so insignificant that you don't care. For example, who looks at modifiers on the first run of Monolith before empowered? Who looks at it?
I don't.
10% increased damage.
It's scary in hardcore.
Come on.
Yeah, and that's the difference.
But that's not true. Okay, Perry. Like no one dies in Monolith. Okay, like normal Monolith, hardcore or non-hardcore. Mods or no mods, okay?
I don't know, Lizard. I have a clip of you dying to Husk of Elder Panion in Monolith.
I've got a lot of clips of Lizard dying from today.
I was limit testing, reading Twitch chat. It's a different story. Like I said, I'm washed up. I like to make you guys feel like you can catch up, but in reality, I can put on the turbo.
The only time I read a modifier is like when I'm like doing like a Rye or like a necrotic dragon, and I see that they're breaking animations, and you look at the side, I'm like, oh, enrage, nice.
Do not do any boss that has enrage. Nope.
And again, I think it's important to have modifiers that are scary. Like I think it's important to have damage modifiers. Just don't make it so the modifier makes the content 5 times as hard. Make it so the content is slightly hard. And again, make sure that as a player, especially for newer people who don't understand the system as much, you should have the feeling of, all right, I'm at 100 corruption, I can deal with this. It's okay. Sometimes it gets a bit iffy. And because I know that with the hard mods it's a bit iffy, that's where I'm going to stop. I'm not going to go for more corruption. That's it for me. But right now, I think that you have the feeling of, especially with, depending on the, again, you get suddenly 7 covenants of the minion with elemental damage, and you go from literally being Zeus and being immortal on Olympus, looking at feeling good, right? Feeling big. And then suddenly, you're not. You're a fucking minion, right? And I just think it's a very, very traumatic experience, right? Like, it doesn't feel good when you get, it just feels like, okay, RNG got me, kind of, right? You didn't sign up for it, kind of. And the mods just make it, especially because you can avoid them, it creates this, and I understand that the mods are kind of like there to deter you from taking certain paths, but let's be honest, the best thing about the Monolith, the thing that everyone enjoys about the Monolith is like, ooh, shiny note, ooh, right? That's what everyone enjoys.
Objective-based gameplay.
Right? Everyone enjoys looking at,
Exalted chess piece.
Yeah, exalted chess note, idols. Everyone loves that, right? That's what people enjoy doing. And it fucking sucks, when you're playing your build, you see you've been looking for exalted chess piece for an entire day, and it has fucking crit avoidance, and you're playing a crit build. And you're like, well, I can eat the cake, but it comes with a shit in it. And then when I tell the devs, yo, devs, what about this shit? Just don't eat it, bro. Like, eat the other side of the cake. Just don't take it. It's still shit, Yeah.
And the thing is, if you're in that situation, you know what you're gonna do? You're just gonna deal with it. You're just gonna deal with it,
and then you're gonna go play another game.
I do that all the time. I'm like, dodge. Oh yeah, let me just go deal with that for 4 monos. Okay, now I can play and enjoy the game again.
and it's funny because they have a lot of modifiers that cap, so they're aware of this. I don't know if they're aware of this and they just haven't done it yet because they're waiting for a. I know the devs sometimes they have overhauls in the back of their head, and we complain about it for a year, but when in reality, in the inside client, they already talk about it. But for example, how come there's things like enemy resistances? It's always 45. It doesn't scale. Right? It doesn't matter if you're at 100 corruption, 1000 corruption. That modifier would always be 45 enemy protections. I think we need that kind of system also for the other damage modifiers. The maximum a damage modifier should give is like 100, maybe.
I think
Which is
mods
already
shouldn't stack in
doubling the
general.
damage, right?
I think mods shouldn't stack in general. They shouldn't have multiple instances of the same mod.
I think if they're capped, it's fine because that's again that comes back to
Yeah.
the strategy. Don't be cocky. If you're taking two of them, you're just dumb, right?
Yeah.
But I think and again corruption should be 50% of the difficulty, not 10%. And right now it's definitely less than that because I don't even look at it. Again, I've been preaching this idea of the tier system for Monolith. Just saying, every
Well, my
100
thing is, well-
every 100 corruption, a higher tier.
I've been playing a lot of other games of late, and specifically this one that Perry and I have played together. It's called Gunfire Reborn,
Okay.
and sometimes you will encounter like an area where it has like a modifier, where it's like enemies when they die, they summon this new enemy, or enemies when they enemies when they get hit, they become immortal for a few seconds, and then they can't get immortal again. Or enemies, they'll heal each other when they're near each other, stuff like that. Things that are different than just stat-based buffs. Like, for instance, when you go into the Monolith and you see, like, Void increase 200% increased damage or whatever, is that interesting at all?
No,
No,
it's
not at all. They're just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna die. And there's more things I could talk about that, but that's like the thing. And like, that's where the modifiers are the problem, because like, for instance, whenever you do like a frenzy haste mod or like an enrage mod, the game changes a little bit, right? Like the boss
I
changes a
like
little.
them. I like them.
Yeah, I like them
I
too.
just think the bosses should have their
Yeah.
cast speed capped,
Well, yeah.
so they don't break, right? Like
Well, no,
someone
they should be built around that. That they.
I mean,
could
someone
have
should
frenzy.
manually check. Okay, this amount of cast
Yeah.
speed it becomes unreadable, and that's it. No matter the mods, right? And it would still be really fucking fast, just not.
Yeah.
I honestly feel a bit ashamed when I have, I'm fighting Emperor of Corpses with Enraged, and I get raided by a PoE streamer, and I have to explain what the fuck is going on the screen. It's a bit embarrassing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
What
that's
I'm
like the
hearing is
thing.
like instead of just having like percent increased damage, percent increased health, just more variety of other things, mechanical
Change-
modifiers.
Yeah, that would
change
be
the
great,
monster
no?
behavior.
Extra projectiles, things like that, right? Those are
Change
cool.
the monster behavior. Like for instance, like, oh, these monsters, they are really fast when they're nearby you, and then when they're not, they're not. So like a range build will take that mod, be like, hey, free stuff. But like a melee build has to think about that, because like if you're nearby enemies, they're gonna move really fast and stuff like that.
I think there's so many ways to make it interesting, like this boss has bodyguards and it spawns like a very specific type of mod that drops a very specific item. Orbis guards, I don't know. I think that this kind of stuff is gonna come over time. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that the current mods we have, the devs are a bit like, well, we have people playing, it's early access, let's just throw a bunch of mods that are the same mod, just so we have something for them to do.
Pretty sure they're aware of this.
But again, sometimes when you talk with the devs about this, they saw, like, yo, devs, shoot up. Again, something like armor shred, right? Why does armor shred scale? Because again, you get armor shred in regular monolith, enemies have 50% chance to armor shred. That's fine. That's kind of balanced, right? Like you get hit, you
Punishes
lose a
you
bit
for
of.
standing still, getting hit a lot.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of makes sense. Your build has 5,000 armor. It goes down
Even
to.
if it got up to 100%.
It's fine. Yeah, but the problem is that scales to 700. So I have a character with 4,000 armor that I grind my ass off unless I'm playing sigils, and then a single mod hits me, and I lose my build. It's like
I lose an entire like
a
part of my
1,000 armor
defenses.
on one
like,
auto.
Mark for Death. Mark for Death doesn't do that. Mark for Death is kept because you can only
I
have
like
one
Mark for
instance
Death
of Mark for
precisely
Death.
because it's capped.
Yeah.
I think Mark of Death is great, right?
Yeah, it's like Ellie weakness.
And you can
with
cleanse
AoE.
it. There's definitely a strategy on that, but
I like this conversation, but we are just over an hour right now. I want to introduce maybe one more topic before I
Okay.
open it up to the future, right? So this is a topic. So Dread and I, you touched base on this with me right before the podcast started, but it sounded like you had maybe something that you wanted to bring up about whether Last Epoch currently is in a good spot for solo play. So we know that in the year 2022, we're supposedly going to have multiplayer coming out. But what about for those people, maybe even like me, who like playing this game as a solo mode, as an SSF mode? Is this game in a good spot right now?
So I
think
brought
so.
this. Let me explain. I brought this up because I found a forum post. Kind of like 90% of the content we bring up on this podcast is because like, oh, someone made a Reddit or a forum post. But it does bring a good question of what you said. Like, is the game good enough for solo play? And I completely agree with that right now. Like, I think the game as it currently stands is one of the best games to play. Like, like whenever I play Last Epoch, I don't feel like as though I need to go trade. Like when I play Path of Exile and I try to play solo, it feels terrible, right? Because you like, oh, you want this item, you're either gonna grind like 2 years for it, or you could just go to trade and buy it. When Last Epoch, nothing feels like as though too out of my reach. Like there are things that are hard to get, like like a 2 LP, like a Vessel of Strife or something like that. Like those seem impossible, but they're not mandatory too, right?
Yeah.
And I like where it stands currently, like the solo versus. Now there are problems in terms of like how long this lasts. Like for instance, like the grinds are a little too quick in some regards, right? Especially in these weekend tourneys we're seeing. But I like the accessibility so far of solo play.
Yeah.
So Lizard, yeah, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's well balanced. I think the problems that we talk about wouldn't affect like the nerfs that I'm talking about and the changes on more damage. They wouldn't affect this because you would still progress
Yeah,
through the core progression. Because I personally think anything past 100 corruption, it's kind of like opt-in, right? Because you don't really, it
yeah.
doesn't really, it's the same boss fights, it's the same everything, right? It's kind of like an opt-in. It's like
It's
the people who
regarding to
wanna,
item
yeah,
acquisition.
exactly. That's the part that we gotta tackle, right? So I think a new player can play and can completely succeed, and everything that your goals are gonna be achievable. And I think a lot of people prove that, and a lot of us, stream everything we do, so people get a realistic expectation of what they can get and all that. And I
As long
really
as you
hope
don't
that
play Tempest Strike.
I really hope that the game is gonna stay that way, even with whatever they do with trade. I really hope the experience is kind of like an adventure, a solo adventure, and the items feel like items, and the drops feel like drops, and the achievement it's a self achievement and not just like, um, kind of like a market simulation thingy where you have
Yeah,
games that are really good at that, right? And going back to what Red was saying about the grind, right? That's another thing because I do think the grind is a bit too low.
yeah.
I personally think that the new crafting system is really cool, but it kind of has also completely undermined. For example, blue items and yellow items don't really exist anymore. Like I feel like I play a character and by level 50 I have purples equipped.
I only
Uh,
look for exalteds because crafting potential's so
yeah,
high.
exactly. And I feel like, I mean, you have a game where normally your progression system back in the day, you started, with the old super punishing crafting system. Well, you kind of like get your tier 10s on day one, then you move to tier 12s, then you're lucky you get a tier 15, and then eventually you go a tier 20, and then eventually you start dreaming about exalteds. And I understand that the casual player that only wants to play a couple hours every day, they still want to get to the cool part, the purple part, right? But the thing is, like, if you give the purple part, if you get to chapter 5 of the book without reading chapter 1, 2, or 3, well, chapter 8 is the end. So, well, I think the devs need to kind of like still uh, tinkle a bit how some of the progression happens
And
a bit too fast.
I think the legendary system was kind of to
Yeah,
add to that, and those are supposed to be our new exalteds. But the thing
yeah,
is like legendaries are optional. Like
yeah, absolutely.
technically don't need them. Like you could play a build with just exalteds to go around, with it.
And again, maybe I just have a bit of an old school view on this, but I like as a new player going in facing problems and having to meet certain goals in order to beat certain challenges that the game throws at me. And I feel like right now we're so overpowered because the skill system is just overpowered. We're so overgeared. We don't failure doesn't really exist in the game anymore. I hope they bring it back with an extra crafting system that you can just flip your items or whatever, just for that sense of for those opt-in, obviously, right? I feel like again like Last Epoch has such a beautiful journey and such a beautiful systems, and I feel like when you're watching a movie and it could have been a 3 hour, but it's a 1 hour because they run out of budget and they just cut parts and you're like, what happened, Hollywood? Like make a
Gonna make me
good.
cry.
Yeah,
Gonna make me cry.
I feel like Last Epoch feels a bit like that. Whereas, for example, the other day on the I made a character and 4 hours in I drop a bastion.
I'm not
And
going to
that's
pretend like that's normal, Lizard. Hold on.
but that happens. It has happened to you too.
It
You had that,
has.
huh? Yeah.
You don't need a bastion. It could have been an exalted item that you wanted.
And and I feel like basically that was like my chase item for the weekend, right? And the fact that I got that on my second monolith, the fact that that can happen, I think it's just like a bit of a. I think there's certain goals that should only be achievable at certain stages of your character.
Like maybe
Again, it's
Bastion
cool.
only drops in Power Monoliths.
Yeah, I think we need more
Yeah.
things like that. I think we need more thresholds. For example, Omnis, I think it's great, right? A lot of people, again, on Twitch chat, a lot of people talk about it. Oh, I'm going for Omnis, right? I'm almost at 200 corruption. Things like that are great. Things like the tier 4 item blocked uniques, things like that. I think we need more of that. And again, I think all of those are achievable for a casual player too. It's just like,
And
but they're gonna have to play the game, right? Which I
one
think
thing
is
I'd
always
like
the
to
goal.
add to this conversation is most of the problem, we can just look at our loot filters, right? And it'll answer for us. But the idea is right now, what Dead Element just said. He said, personally, I think the progression system is perfect. Nobody really cares about blue items, and rares are viable progression items. And I'm going to actually hard disagree on that.
Yeah,
Because I don't know
I
about you,
disagree
Lizard,
too. Yeah.
but when I play in these weekend tourneys, or when I just start a character in general, in like a fresh stash, I just put on whatever until
Yeah.
I get an exalted item of that, slot.
I
Like,
think that's a
oh, I'm just
problem,
gonna use this
personally.
white item until like I get an exalted item, and I do that all the time. And
Yeah.
my loot filters show that. Like my loot filters are always showing me exalteds, and that's it. And I just look at exalteds, like, oh yeah, sure, like this rare item's pretty good. I'll just throw it on until like. And the problem is that the early game isn't difficult enough to make you want to upgrade your character
Yeah.
until you get exalted. You can just
The
simply
fact that you can
there's
go
no-
from literally
yeah.
running gray gear with like I mean you guys seen my stream, that happens to me.
Yeah.
I'm on day 3. I look at my ring. I'm playing a spellcaster and I have a ring that has minion HP. That's
Yeah.
it. Because I wanted the necro res from it.
Yeah.
And,
And then
the,
bam,
the
I
fact
get
that
exalted.
the fact that and I understand what chat is saying, right? With obviously
Yeah.
you want to get to the purples are the cool part.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, if you get to the cool part without the foreplay, without the other stuff, and again, I don't think you need to
It's
be
not
stacked.
rewarding.
I don't think you need to be stacked with purples for a week. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that maybe I shouldn't be done with a character in 3 days. That's what I'm saying. Because if I'm done with 3 days, then let's just say the average player is gonna take him. It's gonna take him a week, 2 weeks. Okay, and then what? We stop playing?
Yeah, and I shouldn't
Like
just
we go to
completely ignore
PoE,
my
we go to
gearing
what
until
do we
purple
do?
items drop,
It's
I shouldn't
interesting.
ignore the gearing until
been-
I put on purple items.
I've
Go
been
ahead.
asking questions periodically during my own progression through the weekend tournaments. Been asking people, how often do you actually craft your gear? So this is like, me being very competitive, and like maybe some people are less competitive, but they're still playing for a couple hours on Friday, Saturday,
Mhm.
Sunday, Monday. So when I ask people like, hey, like, how often are you crafting your crafting gear for your character? Like, are you putting movement speed on your boots on level 10? Are you putting void res on at level 15? Like, what are you doing? And the answers that I get is that people don't open up the forge until like maybe the earliest is level 40 when you put cold res on so the mom and dad
Yeah.
don't one shot you. And like
I-
that's a maybe. And then
For
you're
me-
probably crafting or using the forge like when you step into the monolith for the first time. Which
For
means
me,
you're
the
at
only
45 or 50
time-
levels of like not doing crafting at all.
For me, when I craft, like in a tourney, I don't know about you, Lizard, the first time I ever craft, is like right before Lagan, just because I don't want to instantly die to the beam. I want like Ellie res, right? Into the
I don't
waves,
do
and
Lagon,
that's it.
so
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You go around Lagan, but you get like whenever like that's the first time I craft, and after that, I just make sure my reses are good, and then I'm good all the way up to
I
like 300
normally
corruption.
do one crafting session if I get the woven flesh, and with that I go to empowered, because basically
Yeah,
with woven flesh you kind of like, oh I got it right, so now
you're good to
because
go.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Crit avoid until the crit avoid blessing, and then
Yeah, exactly,
purple items
and
from
that
there.
character is the same. It's basically the same on every character, right? And again, I'm not saying that the game needs to be a grind like PoE. I'm just saying that if you only give us 3 days of content, this game is not gonna succeed. That's what I'm saying. And if
I'm
you
always like a little surprised that it feels unintentionally so, but it feels like Last Epoch is pretty well balanced for these weekend 3-day tournaments,
yeah,
which I
I
don't
think
think
that's
is a good thing. I mean, I like
I
it
think
right
that's
now,
worrying.
but
Like for example, with when we did the tournaments with the old crafting system, how many purples did you have after a weekend? I didn't have any. If I'm lucky, I
Yeah.
had one, right?
And
And
if you
again,
want
I
to,
would normally continue playing those characters because I wanted to get those spicy upgrades. That, by the way, I didn't need, but whatever, right?
serve for
And
fun.
yeah, exactly. And I
And if
feel
you want to
like
see a game that's like based on like a 3-day cycle right after league start or whatever, look at D3 and look at how well it's doing right now.
it's a good point.
yeah,
Okay.
again, I don't think it needs to be like a 1 year grind. I'm not asking about Diablo 2 levels of grind and playing 6,000 hours and not seeing any item. But
I
but
think a
but
week is healthy.
but I think 1 week, 2 weeks, depending, I think it's
Well,
fine.
yeah, I think Lizard, this goes back to something that you said, a couple of minutes ago at this point. But you mentioned like, what's the difference between something that you invest 20 hours into, as opposed to 200 hours into? Like,
Yeah,
how different is my Devouring Orb character right now, and how much better, how much stronger, how much more of a flex is it going to be on my buddy when I finally show it to him? How much cooler is my character going to be after I invest, from 20 to 200?
I feel like the difference between a character that you play for like 3 days and you're kind of like you get level 100 and you're kind of like done, you have all of the things, and the difference from a character like that and a character that you are gonna play for like an entire month or 2 months or 1,000 hours, whatever, we're talking about such ridiculous like power increases that no one's gonna do it. Like I've done it before just because I was bored. I'm, trying to grow on Twitch and I have like extra motivators, but I'm not doing it because it's fun. I'm doing it because I'm a degenerate and I have my own agenda, and advertising myself and all that. But I wouldn't do it otherwise because I know it's not gonna do
If you're a
shit.
casual too,
Yeah, exactly.
that too.
Like if I don't want to do it and I'm the degenerate, how is the casual gonna do it? When a casual is level 60 and it's already literally thinking to yourself, okay, what do I have to do next? Okay, most people, right? We're talking about the thing that I get done on 2 days is getting all my blessings, right? Dude, most people don't have a single blessing that play this game, right? And they're already done with the game, and that's what you're supposed to do. Like a lot of people, and I think we have a lot. Again, I think the game has a lot of issues. The fact that people are happy because we have to play less Monolith after the changes of stability. People are happy because we need to play less of the game because it's a chore, because it's not enjoyable. That I think it should be the opposite,
Well, to
ideally,
reiterate that, I
right?
think I'm happy with the initial grind of like getting up to empowered, and then like now I have to do less empowered. Now it makes me a little sad because like that's supposed to be the whole grind of the game, right? I'm happy that the initial grind is faster because I hate that so much vehemently, just because like it's just boring, non-busy work. Getting from level, follow the outcast to empowered is just like, like turn off your brain, watch something on the side, and just get
Yeah,
there much
yeah, that's
there.
not great.
Yeah.
I will say, answering my own question, thinking about like how much cooler is your character when you go from 20-hour investment to 200-hour investment. It reminds me of Path of Exile, which is a game that just did, their next expansion announcement today, and they're going to be starting next week. But when I think about Path of Exile, if you invest that much time into your character, it's going to be absurd. It's going to be
Yeah,
incredibly cool. You're going to have like all those little pieces of finesse and all those things working together, and you want to show somebody your POV so that you can tell them exactly how it works and how
yeah,
cool
like
it
all the
is.
standard league stuff and the
There's
massive
so
You're gonna
crazy
walk
builds.
into
insane
you're gonna
stuff,
walk
right?
into a map and you're gonna feel like a god.
Yeah, and like that, there's a huge difference between someone who invests 20 hours on a character and 200 and 2,000 hours on a character.
In Last Epoch, that doesn't exist, right, at the moment.
You
And
have
even if
20
you get
hours
those
to get level
upgrades,
75,
like,
and then you have like
Your
a little more after
level
that.
60 Divine Trail build is gonna look better than my
Can we
level
not
100
nerf Holy
60
Trail? This is one of my
60
favorite builds
gauge.
I've ever played.
I mean, no, it's like
It's fine.
Divine
Holy
Trail.
Trail's fine.
It's like Holy Trail.
Please don't
versus,
vengeance me.
like, it's like level 80 like Holy Trail versus like level 100 like 2 weeks invested into Cinder Strike Ignite.
With literally a white weapon.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. It's insane like just the power in comparison. It's like I'm barely getting 200k in the dummy, and I have all these items at level 100. It's min-max, and it's like Holy Trails, like bam, 200k.
I don't know. I feel like when you play an ARPG and you are installing the game knowing that you're not gonna be able to play for a long time, I think you also kind of, at least what I do, right? When I play a game and I already know I'm not gonna be able to play for that much. Like for example, let's just say I want to play Diablo 2 for the weekend, right? Because it's I'm not expecting to get Enigma, right? I'm playing because I want to try the patch and stuff, and I just think that's completely fine, Like if you like, I think you don't need to get a 3 LP Vessel of Strife to have fun as a casual. You don't need it. You can have fun as a casual. Just
like you don't even
like
need
nothing
legendary
that what we're talking about, making the game more gear heavy, making the game getting the game more chase. If you play 2 hours, you're not getting past Monolith. Why do you care? It's not gonna affect you, right? So I think it's more about adding more stuff for people who want to play the game. So if in the case they want to play the game for more than an hour, they actually have something to do. And those who only want to play the game for 1 hour, they won't realize, because they're just quitting the game before Empowered anyway. So
And it kind of sounds like we're talking about slowing down progression and removing instead of saying that we're happy where we are right now, we want more stuff to do. It's like I got to this point, but I don't want to be here so fast. I want more of a struggle, more progression, less power for free. We want to like back ourselves up. That's what I'm hearing from
You
both
just
of you.
want to take it like a fruit roll up, and it's like 3 days, and you just stretch it to like 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
I just think it's like if a casual player needs a strength of 3 to have a 3 out of 10 strength, right? To have a healthy casual experience where they're just enjoying the game, killing monsters and having a blast. Don't give them 7, give them 3, because the experience is not gonna change. They're still gonna kill everything in one shot, because right, everything, as long as it's 3, it's fun. That's what I'm talking about. Right now, when we need 1 power, they give us 10, and when we need 10, we already have it, so it feels meaningless. I think we just basically need to redistribute the power so it doesn't affect casuals. The casual experience, the Monolith experience, is still like just one-shotting trash. Nothing changes. But if you actually are a player who wants to go the extra mile, who wants to be like, hey, this is going to be my main game, I'm going to play this game for longer than an hour after work every day, there should be things for you to do. Because if there's no things for you to do, the game will die. And again, nothing that I've said will affect people that just want to play a character, kill some monsters, and defeat level 60 stuff. Nothing's going to affect you. Because again, you only need 1,000 damage to kill the monster you're fighting. You don't need 20,000. And if you get 20,000, then when it's just gonna be the same experience of one-shotting trash till infinity because you're overpowered, right? There should be points where my damage is not enough and I have to grind for it to be enough.
I like the conversation. I like what we're saying, but I think we're a little bit over an hour, but an hour and 20 minutes at this point. I think I'd like to wrap it up because I know that I think it's 1:30 in the morning for Lizard. So Lizard, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's okay. We'll have them on another time. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm a vampire.
And I guess it's on the screen already, but Lizard, can you tell us where we can find you outside of this podcast?
Well, I stream on Twitch at Lizard IRL, and I'm also a very successful YouTuber, believe it or not.
I'm proud of him. He's actually putting effort into the video.
Excellent thumbnails. I love your thumbnails. I love how much they stand out.
I'm very proud.
I use Neon Text Generator, if anyone's curious, on Google. Not sponsored. But yeah.
And Dread, my co-host, thank you as always for being here. I appreciate your time.
Of course.
And then I guess for all of us... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, one thing I was going to say is... So we are actually announcing that we're going to be taking a a break for next week, just mainly because like we got the Path of Exile League and all that. And of course, Last Epoch is always put on the back burner because of that. And also, it gives me and Perry a little bit of a break as well, and able to spend more time with our family and stuff as well. So next week we're not having a episode, but the next week after that we will have an episode of Epic Epoch, and we might be talking about Path of Exile that time around, just because
Talk.
it's such a big. And I like to talk about that because, of course, most of Last Epoch's audience comes from Path of Exile. Obviously, we know this, right? So it's nice to compare the two games so that we can understand more. I've been having this situation where I've been playing all these other ARPGs. Like I played D2 a bunch Blizzard recently, and it gave me a bunch of ideas for Last Epoch, and like a bunch made me think about more like that. So it's nice to have that. But yeah, we're gonna not have an episode next week. We'll have it the next week after that.
Indeed. All right. And then, from all of us here at Epic Epoch, including Lizard, our special guest here, Twitch chat, thanks for being here. YouTube, Spotify, we'll see you next time. Have yourself a good night.